So, George, as you can see, if you look at the attendees, that people are flowing in, and
I guess I'm not going to see their pictures. I still see only the three of us.
right, but
Okay.
they can hear us now.
Okay.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. We're going to let everyone get into the webinar, and then we'll begin very shortly.
For anyone who is unfamiliar with Zoom, we have created a Q&A section that you can find at the bottom of your screen, where you can type in any of the questions that you may have throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to answer those as they go, and any ones that we can't directly answer, George will cover. And then you can also raise your hand as well if you're interested in verbalizing your question otherwise.
Thank you, Sarah. I think the preference is to put your question in the Q&A so that if we don't get to all the raised hands, we'll at least have a copy of the question and can email the questioners. Okay, it is 7:05, so we'll just give another minute for everyone to join us, and I already see a question. Okay, well, it looks like we have a very good group of people here. We're going to begin, and I'm just going to tell everyone that if you're calling in tonight by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and then in order to unmute yourself to speak, you have to press *6. So we'll say that again when we get to that point in time. So thank you all for joining us this evening. We're very fortunate to have George Vallone, the president of the Hoboken Brownstone Company, which he founded in 1980, here with us this evening at our second community meeting, of which I'm sure there will be many to come. And George's company signed a contract to purchase Liberty Village Outlet Mall in February of last year. Since then, they have been studying the environmental challenges and doing market research, and they paid very close attention to the Stantec and the Zimmerman Volk and the borough's master plan in preparing their plans for the proposed development. George is the potential developer, and there'll be more to follow about that. Tonight he will present his proposed conceptual plan and hear your reactions and suggestions from you, our residents, and our commercial property owners and our commercial business owners. And we're very pleased to have George join us tonight. We're going to hold the Q&A until after his presentation. And I did want to say that the Stantec report and the Zimmerman Volk housing market potential study are something that I would encourage everyone on this call to familiarize themselves with, because I think it speaks directly and very closely to the kind of projects that are being brought forward now. So we will have one more community meeting where we um, have an opportunity to go over those reports again with the directors from Stantec and I hope Zimmerman Voc, so that everyone can really have a chance to digest that information and ask their questions. So, with no further ado, welcome George Vallone.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you for everybody that took time out this evening to learn a little bit about my company and our conceptual plans for the redevelopment of the Liberty Outlet Mall. First off, I just want to talk a little bit about my company. As Robin said, I founded the company with a partner that I met freshman year of college back in 1972. And we started planning for the company right after graduation in 77 and started the company in 1980. So this is our 41st year. My partner has since retired this past year, and I am going forward because I love what I do. We started in Hoboken in 1980, buying up brownstones and row houses for $20,000 and $30,000 and converting them into condominiums. We did the first condo conversion in Hoboken in 1980 on 3rd Street. Our largest project in Hoboken started in 1999 when we purchased the Maxwell Coffee Factory. And after working with the community in about 35 separate meetings, we came up with a conceptual development plan that had the support. And we ended up demolishing the factory, which was the largest factory in the world when it was built, largest coffee factory in the world when it was built back in 1938, to 1.4 million square feet on 6 new city blocks, including the new waterfront park. In 2005, we moved into Jersey City and began acquiring property in the area between the Holland Tunnel and the Hoboken southern border. And we now own approximately 9 city blocks. We have completed 3 blocks, 3 buildings with 637 units on what used to be the Van Leer Chocolate Factory. We now have 3 additional blocks underway with approximately 1,182 additional units. They'll be groundbreaking sometime in the next year. And we also are working in Bayonne. We have a 354 unit project in opportunity zone in Bayonne, and we have a small project up in Troy, New York. I actually lived in Clinton Township for about 10 years, raised my older 2 kids there, had a small farm just off of Stanton Station Road. Used to go to Flemington all the time, used to go to the mall all the time when it was really busy. And we enjoyed, eating and shopping and spending quality time in Flemington. So I feel like I'm sort of a local guy, although I did move to Bedminster about 6 years ago when my youngest daughter came up to high school age and got a scholarship to St. Mary's High School. So we had to move a little bit closer. So I now live in Bedminster. This is what the factory looked like on the top half of the slide when we purchased it in 1999. It was a 24-acre site with about 1.1 million square feet of coffee manufacturing facilities. And the bottom picture is what it looks like today. Built out with 4 new city blocks, 5 12-story buildings, connected in some instances, like the block to the right, with a mid-rise section of townhouses. There's a park in front of it, which unfortunately this picture doesn't show. That's probably my favorite part of the project. But it's called Maxwell Park, and it's one of the most popular parks in the city. We donated it to the city back in early 2007, I think it was. So it's now a public park. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to talk about Liberty Village. And what we have is we have a almost vacant piece of property. There's about 6 stores left out of what used to be around 68 stores. We believe that by redeveloping this site into a housing, primarily housing, we will be increasing the economic performance of your commercial district by increasing the amount of people that live in Flemington and by making it as walkable a project as we can so that people can walk to the various commercial enterprises on Main Street, Stangl Street, et cetera. I think this will be a transformational project because as the Stantec and Volk Zimmerman studies concluded, Hoboken needs to revitalize its tax base. When the three biggest taxpayers in town closed down or shrunk down, like the Liberty Village Mall, the Mikasa and the Flemington Fur Factory shut down completely, a huge amount of the commercial rateable base disappeared, which forced the tax burden to shift to the homeowners and other property owners in town. We believe that by adding a rateable, the size of the rateable we hope to be able to build there, that we will be able to restabilize the tax base, spread it out over many more properties, and reduce the taxes for everyone, or at very least, reduce the rate of increase of people's property taxes. We're going to be remediating the property. We started out doing an environmental investigation. I'm going to talk about the results of that in a little while. There's some significant environmental contamination under the mall, and we'll talk about that in a little while. And we're also working to not resolve entirely, but try to help the flooding problems that go along the brook that are to the west of the property. And as we saw recently after the heavy rainstorm of Ida, there was some significant flooding damage along that creek. And we have a plan that may help that. We'll talk about that too in a little bit. So this is a map that shows commuting from Flemington to the various work centers and commute times. Many people are working from home now, but a lot of people do have to still get to their office occasionally. So we just designed this map to give a rough idea of what the commuting distances were to the various big office and corporate employment centers. So according to the studies we did, what does Flemington need to revitalize it? Well, the main thing is more people, more households. The studies said that there's a need for about 1,000 new housing units in the town. And when those people start to move in, you're going to start to see local enterprises emerging and doing much better than they have been doing along Stangle Road, Mine and Main Streets, and the feed mill offices. This will hopefully reverse Flemington's decommercialization, which originated from the profound change in shopping habits, along with the big box highway retailers that came online, and of course, online shopping. Liberty Village, as I mentioned, it used to be 68 stores. There's only 6 left, and those leases all are going to expire over the next 12 to 18 months. A suitable population increase should help stabilize the local economy, which we believe can only be done by creating more housing. As I mentioned a minute ago, the 2 studies that the town did support that by concluding that about 1,000 new housing units is needed. This housing will be targeted for middle income people. It will be moderately priced. We hope to create a project that is environmentally possible, market feasible, financially viable, and has community benefits. Not the least of which is we're intending to donate the Polo building to the town as a new town hall. There'll be walking paths, bike paths, and a tremendous increase in pervious coverage. Right now, the entire 24 acres is almost completely impervious. It's also consistent with the local objectives as identified in the strategic and the master plans. It's a map of the property. You can see the mall to the right of the railroad tracks, the parking lot to the left, Route 12 at the bottom of the picture. It is 22 acres. It's essentially about a 14 acre on the mall and about 7 acres on the parking lot. The redevelopment plan is going to come up at the end. We'll get to that, and I'm going to leave that on the slide because I have a feeling that's what people want to see the most. It's a conceptual plan. The reuse strategy that you're going to see in the conceptual plan is a 2-phase project. So phase 1 calls for the construction of 140 townhouses for sale on the mall site, plus 55 units of affordable housing, which will be just over the railroad tracks where the Timberland building is right now. And then phase 2 calls for 180 rental units and 5 multifamily buildings. And this is going to be based on a final flood area determination by DEP. So let me talk a little bit about the environmental challenges that we face with this property. There are really 2. One is particular to the mall, and one is particular to the parking lot. The mall was built on what used to be an iron forge. And the iron forge, as was typical for operations of that type, caused a lot of contamination in the soil. There were a lot of oils, solvents, petroleum products that were spilled into the ground for decades. And that soil contamination ended up leaching down into the aquifer and has contaminated the groundwater. The remedy for this contamination, according to our licensed site remediation professionals, after drilling approximately 90 boreholes in the property, most under the mall, some in the parking lot, and some all the way down to the groundwater, is going to be removal of the contaminated soil. All the contaminated soil that is above the levels that are permitted to be left under a cap will be removed. It's approximately $750,000 to $1 million worth of soil removal. And then the groundwater we will be monitoring for the next 30 years. Fortunately, the groundwater has been monitored. There's a few monitoring wells that have been tested every quarter for the last couple of years. And the good news is the contamination in the groundwater has been going down. It's getting better. It's cleaning itself up, probably because of the fact that there's no additional contamination since the mall was built. There was nothing added to the soil. And so the natural movement of groundwater with rain and infiltration getting into the groundwater dilutes the contamination over time, and the levels have been going down. We expect that once the soil, the contaminated soil under the mall is removed, that the speed of increase, the speed of the water cleaning itself up is going to increase. And we hope that certainly over the next several decades, with no additional contamination leaching into the groundwater, having removed the contaminated soil, the water will eventually get back to the state it was in back before the forge was built. There will be deed restrictions on the property. There'll be a DER for soil, which simply means it's a notice to the world that is a capped site and that the cap is protecting the public and that the cap is not to be penetrated without the proper approvals. And there'll be a classification exception area deed notice, it's called a CEA, that will similarly notify the world that the groundwater under the site is contaminated and that it is not to be used. The second environmental problem is regarding flooding. The parking lot is probably about 75% in a flood zone, and therefore you can't build any buildings on grade. You can only build podium buildings, which are buildings that are built above a parking garage, or you have to change the flood area designation. So our plan is to make a proposal to the DEP. We've already made the proposal verbally to the commissioner in charge of these matters at the DEP, Vinny Mazzei. We had him down at the site and we told him what we'd like to do is we'd like to find areas along the stream where there's no buildings, and we would like to excavate those areas to create more flood storage capacity and take the excavated soil and raise the elevation of the parking lot so that we can build on it. And we've proposed to double the flood storage capacity. So for example, we've got about 7 acres, it's not 100% of that, but let's say 6 acres of the parking lot is covered by flood zone. We would then excavate 12 acres in nearby properties and drop the elevation in those areas to allow the flood waters to have more places to be stored during floods. And that will improve the flood situation along the creek for the people that live on the Flemington side, as well as DeVore Farms, which lives on the other side of the creek. It will also, besides helping the immediate flood basin by giving the water more places to build up before it starts overflowing the zone and damaging the buildings in the area, it will also reduce downstream flooding by holding back the waters for a longer period of time. More flood storage area means the waters are held back longer, and that should help downstream flooding. So we're in the process of doing flood modeling right now, which is what we were asked to do by the commissioner. And that basically involves taking topographic surveys of all the properties around the mall that could potentially be excavated to add additional flood storage capacity. And then running those surveys with the topographic information on it through a company that does flood modeling that's respected by the DEP. They will prepare a flood model that would show exactly the dynamics of the pre-condition, the way it is right now, and then the post-condition when there's twice as much flood storage capacity in that basin. Our hope is that with the professionally prepared computer model, we will then go down to the DEP. The modeling company will present their findings, and we're hoping that the DEP will approve the flood mitigation strategy, and then we will be able to create more flood storage in the basin, raise the elevation of the parking lot, and be able to build more housing on the parking lot. The concept plan you're going to see right now, which is one of potentially several different versions that could be possible. The concept plan you'll see tonight calls for about 180 rental units in 5 multifamily buildings on the parking lot. I will say that there's no guarantee we're going to be able to build on some or all of the parking lot unless we get these approvals from DEP. So right now, what is certain is that the mall will be redeveloped with townhouses. We will donate the Polo building, which is not in the flood zone, to the town as a new town hall. And we will build a approximately 55 unit affordable housing rental building on the area where the Timberland building is right now, which is also not in the flood zone. So at the very least, there'll be approximately 140 townhouses, 55 units of affordable housing, and a new town hall. The $1 million required for the remediation, basically I just described that already. There'll be soil removal, the site will be capped, and groundwater monitoring will allow us to measure the natural attenuation of the aquifer below the property and make sure that it continues to clean itself up. The redevelopment will provide the housing within walking distance of all the commercial streets, Stangl, Mine, Main Street, and we will connect through the property. As you'll see when we get to the site, you'll see that there are walking paths throughout the property that people can use to walk or bike to the adjacent commercial areas. So the benefits are that we don't believe there'll be a significant additional demand for local services that isn't already covered by your various police, fire, DPW departments. The redevelopment should provide significant new tax revenue as well as the increased discretionary spending by the residents, which will benefit the merchants, the downtown merchants who have been suffering. The other physical benefits include the environmental remediation, the affordable housing, the donation to town hall, the bike paths, the flood damage improvements if they're approved, a park on Brown Street, and lots of new trees. There are very few trees on the property right now. As I mentioned, it's mostly impervious cover. And we are going to be planting, as you'll see from the concept plan, many new trees, which will help the environment. The Brown Street Park, by the way, just take a minute to talk about that. So there's 2 lots that measure about 50 feet wide that connect the mall out to Brown Street. There's a historic building right there now, which we're going to preserve. And then we're also going to give a driveway. There's a parking lot that takes people to that property management building and the historic building. That'll be ripped up. There'll be a driveway. We'll subdivide the building so it's on its own legal lot. And the remainder of that lot, as well as the lot right next to it, which we're also purchasing, will become a park. And we're going to meet with the Brown Street folks to talk about what they'd like to see, what type of improvements they'd like to see on that lot. We did not want to put a road through to Brown Street, which was one of our early concept plans, because we just heard that Brown Street does not want to have the traffic from the development using it to get in and out of the area. So there will be no connection to Brown Street. So the next steps on our journey here to get this project started is that we need to be designated as the developer. That's a feature of the redevelopment law. The town adopted a redevelopment area back about a month ago. That was the first step. And then the second step is they designate my company as the developer. The third step is the redeveloper agreement, which we will negotiate once we're designated as developer. And that will spell out the particular responsibilities of us and what the town is willing to do and all the different details of our venture. We will then prepare a site plan application for the planning board. The planning board will have public hearings on it, and comments will be taken, and there will be a vote, hopefully for approval. Meanwhile, environmentally, our licensed site remediation professional will review and approve the remediation. He's deeply into the site investigation. As I mentioned earlier, we've done 90 soil borings and groundwater tests across the site. We've got a fairly good concept of where the contaminated soil is and how much of it needs to be removed. He's in the process of taking all the site investigation data he's gathered so far, seeing if there's any data gaps we need to fill, and he'll be generating a remedial action work plan, which will be the plan that we will follow to remediate the site and make it suitable for housing. And then, of course, the last step was the one we talked about, which will probably take the longest, and that's to get the DEP approval of our proposed flood mitigation plan. So here's the site plan. Obviously, this is an aerial view looking down on the site. You can see the railroad tracks cutting through the middle of the picture and curving up to the right, and that separates the property. The mall was to the right of it, and what you see now is you see the townhouses laid out in small clusters. You can notice the park that is right over here, which goes out to Brown Street. The property manager's house, I call it, which is very old and is going to be preserved, and it'll be put onto its own lot with a driveway. And then the road is going to continue right where it comes in now, same curb cut you enter into now, only now it'll go right up through the middle of the development, right up to Church Street. It'll cross over the grade level crossing that exists right at the top of the property, and it'll continue north. There will be a street connection through to the other half of the property that'll go right through the middle right here. It'll use the existing grade level crossing that crosses the tracks right there. And most of you would probably realize that this is where you cut through to the parking lot, and the Polo building is to the right if you're heading west, and the Timberland building is to the left, right over here. And so the affordable housing building will be right here. It actually might be switched with the parking lot, and the parking may be over there. We have to determine exactly where that flood line is, because we can't build a building, this building in the flood zone. Oops, sorry. So that street will connect with Stengel, which is going to stay in its current configuration exactly the way it is now. It goes right back out past the restaurant, out to Route 12. That'll stay the same. And then this is our parking area right here, which, as I mentioned, all these buildings currently sit in the flood zone. So we have them designed as on-grade buildings. If we get the permission to fill the site, it could be just like similar to this, on-grade buildings with parking around it. If we don't get permission to fill the site, we may end up changing these buildings to podium buildings, and then the parking would be under the building instead of around the building, the way this one shows. We're looking at some of these other properties right now, possibly expanding the site and ending up with a larger footprint. But at the moment, this is the piece we have under contract. This is the property that's in the redevelopment zone, and this is all we've been planning for at this point. If we end up assembling more property after we're the designated developer, we may very well go ahead and expand this footprint in this parking area to incorporate these other sites. A lot of that's going to have to do with whether or not we get the permission to fill the site and excavate areas along the brook to increase the flood storage capacity, as I mentioned earlier today, because all these adjacent properties are mostly in the flood zone. So they need to be treated exactly the same way as the parking lot is being treated in this concept plan. So I'm going to stop at this point, and I'm going to switch back to here. I think probably people are going to want to ask questions about the site plans. I'll leave this one on the screen, and I believe Robin is going to go through the questions and read them to me, and I will do my best to answer them.
Hi. All right. Hi, George.
Hi, Robin. I knew you were there.
Okay. I didn't want you to think I left you hanging. So, George, there's a lot of questions in the Q&A. Um, I'm going to uh, start with this one. There's also some questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to all of them. Can you describe the townhouses? Two-car garage, basement, outdoor, patio are this gentleman's main question.
Sure. These are designed as what they call stack towns. So there's one unit over another unit, and each one has its own garage. The garages will face the street. The front doors will face the green areas. You can see in between each cluster, like for example, right here. This is a green area with paths that go through it, and that's where the doors are to all the units. And then they have their garages in the back opening up onto the street. There'll be 4 stories. There'll be a garage and a room that'll duplex up to the 2nd floor as the lower unit. And then the 3rd and 4th floor will make up the upper unit.
Thank you, George. Next question. Will the park by Brown Street have a playground also?
I expect it will. We're meeting with the Brown Street folks in the next week or two. One of the residents there, I forgot her last name, her first name's Ellen. She's been gracious enough to agree to organize the neighbors, and we're going to have a meeting to talk about exactly what type of improvements they'd like to see on the on that Brown Street Park, as well as some buffering that they're interested in. You know, one of the comments we got at the public meeting we held last Wednesday was from the Brown Street folks, and a lot of people just have grass all the way to the back of their property, and they were a little concerned that they were going to be looking at a 4-story building in their backyard. So we're going to meet with them, and we're going to talk about some different ideas we have about buffering those. Some of them have some very large trees. I was actually looking at some other pictures of the aerials of Brown Street. Some of them already have some significantly large trees. So those people probably won't have anything to look at other than the trees they look at now, but some of them don't. And, you know, we're willing to put some nice evergreen type trees in there or other types of plantings to buffer that view looking out their back of their house toward their backyard. And we're going to drill down into that at our meeting with the Brown Street folks. That's going to come up, I think it's either next week or the week after.
Thank you. A couple of questions about the Black River Railroad, what will happen to it, and also about consideration to keep residents off the tracks.
I've met with Kane Baringa, I think his last name, I can forget a name like that. Very nice guy. He owns the railroad, and he's very interested in whether, as am I, as to whether or not we may be able to get passenger rail to go through here now. Right now, it's mostly freight, except for the special passenger trains he runs, which I understand are quite popular, but it's just for like a tourist type thing. These tracks actually go into Raritan, which is a station stop that people could switch seats and get into Manhattan. And it also goes west toward the river town. So we think it would be great if we could get some money from the infrastructure fund to do the necessary repairs so that he could run passengers east that would be commuting into New York City. And also it would be a way for people coming out of the city who want to visit Flemington and want to go on further the river towns, take rail to get to them. So hopefully we'll have some success in getting some more usage out of that rail line. Fortunately, the owner is very open to it, as am I. And we're going to be talking to our congressional folks about whether or not we may be able to apply for some infrastructure money to try to get that done. There will be whatever is necessary to protect the residents. There'll be fences along the property lines and fences along the tracks. The ones that are there right now don't really work, and they're mostly dilapidated. Those will all be replaced.
Okay. a couple of questions about the timeline, George.
So assuming that we are designated by the council at an upcoming council meeting, that's what really gives us the ability to start really working on the details of the project, followed by the redeveloper agreement, which should be relatively short order. I gotta believe we should be able to negotiate and finalize that within a month. I'm thinking that in the next 2 to 3 months, we'll be ready to submit plans for the site plan approval to the planning board. You need to have both of those steps done. You need the developer designation, you need the redeveloper agreement done before you can apply to the planning board. The planning board will probably take a meeting or 2 or 3, depending upon the amount of questioning that goes on. They will then vote to approve it, hopefully. And then the following planning board meeting, there'll be a resolution memorializing the approval. That has to be published in the papers. That usually takes a couple of days. And then there's a 45-day statutory appeal period when people could appeal the planning board's decision. So add that all up, you're probably talking about May or June before we're fully vested and ready to start the demolition work. The demolition work will probably take 3 or 4 months to take the mall down. Then the soil remediation gets going. That'll be another couple of months. So my guess is that by the end of this year, we should be in the process of demolishing the mall early next year, doing the remediation, and by the middle end of next year, you should start to see the houses go up.
Sounds great. A question about plans for historical buildings on the property.
Yeah, at the meeting last week, Lois, a woman named Lois, who you probably know, she's very involved with the historical buildings in town. She pointed out that she believes there's at least 2 buildings on the property, 2 or 3 buildings on the property that she feels are historically significant. She mentioned 2 of them. One, she said, is on Brown Street. And I went and looked at it, and if it's the building I think it is, it's already been sort of changed. They ripped out the original windows and put in more like storefront windows. So I'm not sure if that's the right building, but if it is, I'm gonna probably meet with Lois and discuss that, because I don't personally see anything historically significant about that one since it's already been kind of bastardized. The other one is kind of similar story. It's down by the pond, and as I understand it, it's that tall building, and I think it used to be used to repair locomotives. Which probably explains why there's a lot of contamination right around there. Again, that building had an elevator added onto it, and it had gigantic picture windows put on the front of it, so I'm not so sure how historically significant that is. But more importantly, it's right on top of the worst part of the soil contamination. That sort of that town square in the mall where the pond is, and the railroad locomotive building is adjacent to that. That's where the worst contamination is on the entire property. So like I said, I'm going to meet with Lois again. We're going to go look at the buildings. I'm going to explain some of the challenges with it. We'll see if we can work that out. But, you know, that's sort of a TBD at this point, to be determined. We really need to spend some time with Lois, identify the exact buildings. You know, we may end up getting our historical consultants to do some research on them. And to analyze what's been done to them already, to change them, and then we'll make some decisions as to whether or not they're worth saving.
Great. So there are more questions about transportation and Transbridge. Transportation, there are many people who would love to see more transportation options, and how this project might be able to impact our current transportation situation, and also specific questions about Transbridge and the future.
Yes, so we're going to meet with Transbridge, and we're going to see whether or not they're interested in maintaining a park and ride. As I understand it, it was shut down for a while. It might have just been COVID related. I think they've begun operating again, and from some of the folks that I spoke to that live right in the area, they say it's not getting a lot of use yet, but that may change. And if that's the case and Transbridge wants to continue to run buses in there, we're going to work with them to make sure they've got a parking area. It may be on one of the parking areas over here behind the restaurant. But we're going to try to work it out with them, because if they think there's enough business, then there probably is. And we ought to see if we can find a way to get them to still operate out of this general locale.
And another question about if parking ends up under the buildings, could some commuter parking be included to allow for continued bus service? Will internal roads be engineered to allow for full-size buses, turning ratios, etc.? I know that's very specific.
I would say yes and yes. If the buildings do become podium buildings, that is going to free up a lot of the land around the buildings right now, which as you can see is surface parking. So I would say yes and yes. There will be more available parking on our property, the mall parking lot, if that happens. And yeah, we'd like to see that happen. I think it's a good thing for the project. I think it's a good thing for the town.
George, as I'm sure you suspected, there are questions about the impact on the schools with this, with the addition of new housing.
Yeah, the schools right now, based on some preliminary studies we've done, and after we're designated developer, we're going to gear up those studies and have more specifics about it. But the studies that we've done sort of comport with what's happening in public school systems in most towns, not just in New Jersey, but across the country. There's a population reduction now, school-age children reduction, and it's happened basically after the baby boom, the wave of children that came in the baby boom, like me and my children, that filled up the schools and caused a lot of towns to build a lot of school capacity. Well, those kids are up and out, more in the working world now, and there's a lot of capacity in most public school systems. We believe in the Flemington, 100 Central School District. That's also the case. We don't see a significant amount of school children coming out of this. We are going to run a study. We're going to use the Rutgers multiplier numbers, and we're going to come up with some numbers of how many school-age children and what grades they would be in. But right now, we don't anticipate a significant impact that's going to cause anything other than filling up empty seats in the school system.
Great, thank you. So some questions about mixed use and why are you more focused on housing than on adding retail or retail on the first floor?
Yeah, so we really took our cues from the two market studies you mentioned at the beginning, Robin. The Stantec study and the Volk-Zimmermann study both said that housing is really the solution for Flemington to reinvigorate Flemington. And we felt that if we put a lot of commercial retail on this property, all we'd be doing is cannibalizing the Main Street merchants and the Stangl merchants and the Mine Street merchants. And we didn't want to do that. We think they need more customers, not more competition. So the only retail, or one of the comments we got, suggestions we got, was that maybe a small food store in the project would be helpful for people that want to run out and get something small, not requiring a big trip to one of the big supermarkets, something that you can walk to and pick up some milk or eggs or something. So we're thinking about the one-story portion of the Polo building. The Polo building has a one-story, a two-story, and a three-story section to it. And we were thinking the north end of the property, one towards the Lone Eagle brewery, that's the one-story section. And we're going to have discussions with the town. If they're interested, we would take that one-story section and make that a separate part of the building, which the town could then lease to a small food operator and thereby collect rent, which would help offset the cost of running the town hall and maybe make it self-supporting. But at the very least, decrease the amount of money that's needed from the taxpayers to run the new town hall.
And while you're on the subject of money, George, there are many questions about how you're financing this project, as well as Someone asked a very specific question about if the parking lots are not as buildable as they as you would as you might want them to be, then is the project still financially viable?
It is. We're going to go ahead with it, even if we're not allowed to build on the parking lots, because as I said, we probably could build some podium buildings in the flood zone, so we think we'll get something out of it, but it'll take a while, and in the meantime, it'll be a parking lot as it is now, and if the Transbridge guys still want to keep running in there, they'll probably come running in and out just the way they are now, and there'll just be a whole lot of parking for folks that are either commuters or otherwise need to use the parking areas. I understand when you have some of your large community events along Stangle, there's a significant need for parking, and certainly that would help fulfill some of it. But it's financially viable with the townhouses. It's better with the parking lot being developed for sure. And we're going to use conventional financing. We've got investors that will put up the equity capital alongside myself and my partner. And then the banks will fund the rest.
So there are questions about if you're seeking a pilot.
We have to, in order to get a pilot, you really need to do a very thorough economic analysis that shows why you need a pilot. And we're not at the stage yet where we're ready to run those numbers. We really wanted to get a concept plan that we thought was supported by the community, and that we kind of got the nod from the administration that this would be supported. And of course, the planning board approval is the real final step in certainty that we can build what we intend to build. So once the plans are a little more certain, we'll start to run the economic models that need to be run, and we'll see whether or not there's a argument in favor of getting a pilot for the project. So that's a to be determined still.
Thank you. Question about the various different costs for the different types of housing in the project.
So the townhouses, again, this is a little bit conceptual, but we believe the townhouses are probably going to sell for between 350 and 450, 350,000 and 450,000. Based on size. The lower units in some instances will be a little bit smaller than the upper units. And then the apartments are going to rent for the comparable rents in the marketplace right now are somewhere in the $30 a square foot range per year. So if you took 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartment at $30 a foot, that would be $30,000 a year divided by 12. It's a little less than, what is that, about $2,500 a month, roughly, for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. So those are sort of the average prices that we're looking at right now. Everything depends on the number of square feet of each unit. So I'm just giving you averages at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a very long question. Questions about the affordable units being separate from the market rate units as opposed to being integrated. Is that something you're stuck with, or something you're interested in thinking more about?
Yeah, there will be a handful, we're thinking 3 or 4 of the townhouses will be priced at the affordability guidelines, but in order to get the bulk of the units built, you need to use tax credits. There's 2 tax credit programs right now, and one of them is what they call the 9% tax credit, and that's where 100% of the building is affordable. And that's really the best way to build affordable right now, because all the units are in one building. They're funded. The subsidy that's needed is through tax credits, and you only need to build the number you need to build. If you do the 4% tax credit, that's called an 80-20. So 20% of the units are affordable, 80% are market. So to get 55 units of affordable using the 4% tax credit, you'd have to build over 200 apartments because it's 80-20. So we just think the most efficient way to do it is go for the 9% tax credits and build the entire building as affordable, all 55 units or so as affordable units. The building is going to look identical to the other apartment buildings. You're not even going to know from looking at it or driving past it that the units in there are priced under the affordability guidelines. But our feeling is that's the most efficient way to build it.
Thank you. I think people have a general curiosity about walkability, about bikes, about important public amenities, landscaping, benches, whatever public amenities you're planning to include in your plan.
Yeah, so can you see it? I blew it up a little bit. Is that coming through on your side, Robin?
Yes, that's very helpful.
Yeah, so these yellow lines here, those are all walk paths, bike paths. There's one that goes all the way along the site on this side if people just want to bike or walk through the project. There's another one over on the Brown Street side that goes all the way up that side. And then, of course, the streets all have sidewalks on both sides, as well as the courtyards having pathways in and out and through. So it's a very walkable site, very walkable, very bikeable. All the bike paths will connect to, at the north end, connect to Church Street, down to south end, they'll come out onto Route 12. So there'll be multiple access points to get to the project and to get through the project.
That's great, thank you. Question about traffic in the area, in this increasing traffic, thoughts about entry roads, access roads, traffic on the circles, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, we intend to do a traffic study, but I'm fairly certain that the levels of service that you're going to experience at the connection points from this project are going to be substantially less than the levels of service when the mall was there and you had thousands of people coming in cars and buses every day. So we're pretty certain, but again, we're going to do a traffic study. So the traffic experts, they're the ones that need to be certain, not so much me. But my intuition is that we're going to show higher levels of service with this project than what was experienced when the mall was there.
A couple of questions about what will happen to the stores in Liberty Village and phasing them out to begin construction. Also, a question about whether you have pictures of phase 1 and phase 2. Rendered
By pictures, I think they mean elevations probably, right? Like what are the buildings going to look like?
A rendering of phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah, that's what I thought they meant. Yeah, no, we don't have elevations yet. Right now, we're just doing what's called massing to figure out what can fit on the property. But we will have elevations by the time we get to the public forum in front of the planning board. Probably long before that, actually, we will have designed the elevations of the building. This is just a massing model, though, just to show what types of buildings we're intending to put, where they're going to be located, and how the street grid connects everything. What was the other question? There was 2 questions there, wasn't there?
The renderings of phase 1 and phase 2.
Oh, okay. I answered that.
Yep.
Not yet. What was the other one?
I honestly forget.
Oh, well, maybe it was only that one question.
Right. Will the map be shared? And what is the green area around the upper right on the corner of Church and Central Ave?
Yeah, I think they mean right here. That's Church Street right now, comes down here to the west, and it continues through here, and then it curves, and actually it's part of the property where Church Street goes down along the railroad tracks here, and then eventually gets you to this point where you can cut across the grade level crossing, go in between the Polo building and the Timberland building, and get out to Stengel Street, or to go further into the parking area. So this street is totally destroyed. It's very dangerous right now. There's some huge potholes. It really doesn't accomplish anything. So we thought it would be better to put a brand new street down through the middle here and connect it to the same exact spot that Church Street, this Church Street extension used to get to for people that want to get across to Stengel. So that road will be shut down from here to here. And then this portion of it right here, this is showed as just some trees and plantings. We've also talked to the woman who runs the consignment shop right here. She would prefer if this was parking. So we may end up putting additional parking in right there with just some dead end signs right here. So people coming down Church Street realize they can no longer go through there and get down along here. They've got to turn right here, go down through the project if they want to get over to Stengel Street on a brand new road. So that's a to be determined. The planners put in trees and green space. It very well may be parking with trees along the edge.
Question about, will the phase 2 multifamily residences be apartments or 2-family homes?
Apartments.
Thank you. There's questions about green roofs, as well as how will the character of the townhomes fit into the rest of the fabric of the borough?
Well, they're not going to look like the beautiful historic, Victorian homes that abound. I think it's one of its most wonderful parts about it is how the old architecture of all the old homes has been preserved in many, many instances. So we're not going to try to recreate that look on a townhouse, but they'll be nice looking. I mean, we're going to try our best to make them as nice as they can, and at the same time, try to keep them as affordable as we can. As I mentioned, I think 4 or 5 questions ago, we haven't done elevations yet. We're just at the massing study. So those will be forthcoming though, and we'll be happy to show them as early as we've got them and take suggestions from folks.
So again, the question about green roofs and with recent commitment to address climate change, what renewable or green energy sources will you be able to incorporate into this project?
Well, all the buildings are going to meet Energy Star standards. That's kind of common in the industry right now. So you're going to have very, very efficient appliances, furnaces, hot water heaters. All those will be Energy Star rated for sure. I do not think we're going to put green roofs on the townhouses. They're just too small to put them up there, and it'll be a maintenance thing for the homeowners. The apartment buildings, we may look into that, but again, we're trying to keep these things as affordable as possible. And when you think about the amount of pervious coverage that we are going to make, the amount of impervious coverage that we're going to make pervious, as well as the amount of new trees that are going to be planted throughout the development, that should help a lot with the heat island effect. It should be much better from a standpoint of stormwater infiltration. All of these green areas will be infiltration, pervious cover. So we're going to do as much as we can to make them as energy efficient. And we are going to use green infrastructure for the stormwater all over. And, we're open to other thoughts on it, but it all has to be cost effective because these homes have to be priced for the market.
Agreed. Let's see. How are you doing, George?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Feel okay about answering more questions? It's
Sure. Yeah, we told everybody we'd be from 7 to 9 for another hour.
Okay. Well,
here we
go. Round 2. So let's see. I guess there's some questions about whether or not you have the skill set and vision to do a project in a smaller town like the borough of Flemington. People have questions about your experiences being wonderful but much more urban, and that Flemington is a little more family oriented. So we'll let you speak to that.
I think real estate development is kind of generic, although the questioner is absolutely correct that the vast majority of our experience is urban. We were selling to, I mean, today you call them millennials. Back then, when we were doing it in the 80s and 90s in Hoboken, we called them yuppies. But essentially, they were young people just getting their careers started. They were meeting their significant others. They were forming households. They were forming families. I think that a lot of the same kind of folks are going to want to live here. It's also possible that empty nesters may want to move here, people that have large homes in the area, in the towns surrounding Flemington, but want to live in a smaller townhome or a smaller apartment and be able to walk to the main street and to Stengel Street and do their shopping. I think this will be attractive to them too. In fact, the Volt Zimmerman study that did a lot of specific demographic research supports that they do believe that this will be a combination of young people, singles, mingles, which are two people living together that are not married, and empty nesters are going to be potential customers for the project. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to design this thing for the market. It was very helpful that your organization and the town did engage Stantec to look at the master plan aspects of the future and make recommendations, and also the Zimmerman Vogt study, which was really focused on housing. That was incredibly helpful for us to understand the market. It put us at least 6 months ahead of where we otherwise would have been if we had to conduct that research ourselves. So it was a really, really smart thing to do. And it was very helpful. And we're trying to follow the recommendations in those reports as closely as possible because we think they were really good.
Thank you. I guess there's still some questions about what's the future of Liberty Village for the shops that are still open, and when will they close and development begin?
Yeah, that actually was an earlier question. I think that might have been the other half of that other question. I couldn't remember.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's 6 stores left. Their leases expire over the next 2 years. I have a feeling if I offered them the opportunity to break their lease now, they probably would. Every time I've walked through the mall, and it's been quite a few times since I've gotten the property under contract, I spent a lot of time walking the site, going in and out of the stores. I've rarely seen any store have more customers than they had salespeople standing around. So I'm not sure if they're making any money or they want to stay to the end of their lease, but we'll probably give them an opportunity to get out early. And I think that they'll probably take it. And if 1 or 2 of them don't, then we have the right under redevelopment law to relocate them to another place and allow the project to proceed on schedule. They can't hold us up.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I think it would probably be helpful for you to answer it. But someone is asking if eminent domain will be, if you have to take any homes or parcels to do this project.
No, we're only using the Liberty Mall property. We're not adding any other properties around it. The redevelopment area that they adopted is a non-condemnation area. There's 2 types of redevelopment areas. Ones where you can do condemnation through eminent domain and ones where you can't. And the mayor and council decided that this is one where you can't. But it's really, for me, it's really irrelevant because I own the entire site. I don't need to condemn any other property for this. And the properties that we're talking to, potentially assembling down around here and up at the top here, those we're just talking to the owners and we're just trying to come to a market rate deal with them and see whether or not it's worth it.
You are being heavily encouraged to meet with, in addition to the Brown Street residents, some of the other residents like Village Court around the project. So are you planning to have more community meetings as this project develops?
I would be totally happy to meet anybody that wants to meet me. If if somebody wants to be the group leader for a particular community and organize a meeting, you can get a hold of Robin. She's been absolutely super to work with. She's always available. She answers her phone every time I call her. Sometimes I feel like I'm a pain in the neck, but but yeah, pick somebody to organize the group and get a hold of Robin and me, and we'll definitely sit down and answer any other questions or take any other suggestions that they may have.
I think I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain what you really mean about generic, because I think people are equating that with you're developing something generic and cookie cutter, and we're getting a bunch of those questions. So I think I don't think that's what you meant when you said that developing is sort of generic or follows a certain model. So would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I think I created a misimpression. When I said that redevelopment is generic, I was answering the question of, hey, George, it seems like you've got a lot of urban experience, and how does that equate to building out in the country here, out in Flemington? And so I was talking about the process of redevelopment is generic. So our process is, we have 4 major risks we need to manage when we do real estate development. And it doesn't matter if it's urban, suburban, rural. The first thing I do is I do environmental risk management. I've got to assess the environmental condition of the property. I've got to spend money investigating that property. If any of the historic uses indicate there may have been potential contamination left behind by historic industrial use. In the case of the mall, we knew right away there used to be an iron forge under the mall, and we knew that those are very typically industries that leave a lot of contamination behind when they leave. And so we focused our site investigation on the mall site. I would say the vast majority of the 90 site, the 90 soil borings we did were in and around the mall. And so the first thing we do in our process is environmental risk management. The second thing we do is zoning risk management. We want to make sure that the property is zoned for our intended use. Well, the town took care of that. They responded to the studies that they did, and they made the area an area in need of redevelopment. And the standards allow townhouses and multifamily buildings, as well as retail. So that's the second risk. We do environmental risk management, then we do zoning risk management. The next thing we do is market risk. And as I mentioned earlier, the 2 studies that were conducted by the city really helped us to understand the market. And so we consider market risk low. The next one is construction risk. We want to know whether or not the cost of building the particular types of homes that we're intending to build can be low enough so that they can be sold at the affordable prices necessary in this market. We can't build $1 million townhouses if the bulk of the market can afford $350,000 townhouses. So market risk is the 4th risk management process we go through, which the town was very helpful with. And all of that dominoes into the financial risk. And the financial risk is really, what do we have to pay our investors, and what is the bank going to price the loans at? And that is a function of the risk perception they have. So if we can tell them that we've isolated and managed environmental risk, we've got entitlement risk, we've done market risk, we've done construction risk, then the financial risk will be perceived to be low, and we'll be able to attract equity at reasonable prices and bank loans at reasonable interest rates. So when I said generic, I didn't mean the houses were going to be generic. I meant the process of going through the redevelopment process is generic. So you have these 5 major risk categories that you need to manage, and only once you've managed all of them can you get the financing to come in and get the project done. So I'm sorry if I confused a few people there, but I was talking about the process of doing real estate development in a brownfield, as opposed to the houses.
Thank you. A couple of questions about complementing or competing with development on Main Street. And I actually think that's a really, it's a great question, because I think it helps explain why why housing here can potentially help um, infill retail and attractions in other locations. So would you address that, please?
Yeah, well, the other big project in town, and they're significantly ahead of us, they're already under construction, is Jack Cust's project on the hotel site, the Union Hotel, and the 4 or 5 acres behind the Union Hotel. So, I mean, I remember going to the restaurant at the Union Hotel when I lived in Clinton Township, and it was awesome. You felt like you were eating in history. And so I'm really glad that he's restoring that building. As I understand it, they're going to add a new building behind it so that they can get it up to 100 rooms under New Jersey law. Any hotel of 100 rooms or more gets the liquor license. And those are very difficult to come by. So I think he was really smart to do that. And then he's going to put, I believe it's about 200 apartments on those acres behind the hotel, with a courtyard and an access way to get to and from them off of Main Street. So he's probably a year or two ahead of me. So my thoughts are that my intuition is that he'll be up and finished and fully rented before we come online with our apartment buildings. Our townhouses won't compete; they'll be for sale. His product is all for rent. So we're pretty confident that this is going to be a very complementary product. He's also doing some retail space. I think he's going to have 2 restaurants with another liquor license that they'll share. So he and his retail tenants, along with all the retail folks along Main Street, they need more people. They need more customers. That's what's going to revitalize them and get them to be successful and to encourage new retailers to come in. There's a lot of vacant space on Main Street, and there's some vacant space along Stengel. And I think that all those folks need to decide to open up new businesses is to see a lot of traffic, foot traffic in particular from the town. So I think it's a great project. I think the town was very smart to rezone that as they did and to push the developer agreement to get a lot of the things they wanted there. And I think it's going to be a great addition to Main Street.
Agreed. There are still a lot of questions about wanting to be sure you are aware of the that there really aren't a lot of parks, playful pauses, op, places to walk your dog, and there are people who would like a skate park and some options for you know uh, walkability. So that seems to be a constant refrain. And there are also questions about when you'll be showing designs and more design plans, more discrete design plans.
Yeah, very soon. Well, the first part of the question was, parks and those other amenities you were mentioning. Those are commercial assets, basically. I mean, not the parks, but the other suggestions that were made there. Those are basically commercial assets. And we don't see a big demand. I know at the meeting we held last week, people said, they said, "Well, why can't you build a movie theater on the property? Or how about a bowling alley on the property?" And they had all these ideas, a theater on the property. And I said, look, if you know a group that is well financed and wants to do a movie theater or a bowling alley or a cultural center, although I understand you've now got a cultural center coming in on Stengel, which is going to be great, and we will do whatever we can to help support that. I think you told me it was called the DIY, Robin, something like that.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe you want to just tell the folks on here about that. They might not know about it. I think it's good news.
It's great news, and it has been widely discussed that we need an art center, and a place particularly for youth to go and hang out and make music and have some fun. So DIY is moving into the former Enjoy Your shelf space, which is next to the new 39 Mine and near Humdo and near Stangle Factory. And it's just great news that they were able to find the right space at the right price, and we're really excited. And they just made the announcement yesterday, so it is new news.
Yeah, that's great news. I typically get a lot of questions about, why can't you do more parks or open space or different kinds of amenities? Every project has a budget. And in this case, unfortunately, we're going to be spending almost $1 million just cleaning up industrial contamination from 100 years ago. And it's been polluting the groundwater for 100 years. So just that aspect alone, and you can imagine, we could have carved off an acre of the property and built a park on it if we didn't have to spend $1 million cleaning up the site. Likewise, we heard that the town really could use a new town hall. I've been to town hall for a number of meetings behind the firehouse there on, I think it's Park Street. And it's really small and tight, and it's not super nice. It doesn't really speak to a town with the history and the potential that Flemington has. It's kind of third world in there. So we thought that taking what we think is one of the nicest buildings on the site, which is the Polo building, which is one of the more recent buildings to be built there. It's one of the newer ones. That one and the Timberland building are the two newest stores to be built in that mall. And donating that to the town so it has a real town hall. And maybe a food store paying some rent, and there'll be a parking area right across Stangle Street where there's a little parking area right now. That's all going to be subdivided. The Polo building will have its own parking lot. I've already talked to the mayor. The mayor said she's perfectly happy to allow the merchants to use that parking lot evenings and weekends when the town hall's closed. So that's going to create some extra parking for the Stangle Road merchants. And then we've got the Brown Street Park, which was a decent sized piece of property. That'll be turned into a park. We could have run townhouses down both sides of that property and expanded the footprint of the development area, but we thought that was inappropriate. We heard clearly that the Brown Street folks didn't want traffic emptying out and going from Brown Street into the project, and they could use some open space in a nice park in the middle of their block. So we're going to go ahead and do that on that piece of property. So we're doing as much as we can and to still keep the budget financeable. We'd of course love to do more, but there's always that financial risk that we have to watch. We have to make sure that the project is profitable enough to be able to attract the investment capital that's going to be necessary to make this thing happen. We can't do everything, but we're doing a lot.
George, I think this is a really interesting question. What made you decide to purchase this property when it is such a different market than your prior projects or areas? What makes you think this is a good investment?
Well, as I said, I have a fondness for this property. I have a fondness for Flemington. That's where we used to go to shop when our two older kids were little. And I like the town. I like the administration. I think the administration's been great. We've been working with them closely on this, and they've been very supportive. You and your organization, Robin, I think does a tremendous benefit for the town with all the efforts that you put in. The fact that they set the table for developers by doing those two market studies, the macro study by Stantec, the more micro study focused more on housing by Zimmerman Volk. The town really went out of their way, I think, to do the homework necessary to attract developers like me. And I guess the reason I got it was I found out it was going to go on the market, and I was able to put it under contract before it even went out to the market, which I always like to try to do because I find when things go out to the market, the prices escalate. And there always seems to be somebody that's willing to pay a whole lot more for a piece of property than I am. Not sure how they finance those deals. A lot of those deals, they go under contract, they don't close, or they close, but then they don't get built because I think that people don't understand risk management. A lot of developers don't understand risk management, and they can't really quantify the feasibility of the project. We have a very scientific method that we use, which I talked a little bit about earlier. And I thought this would be great fun. I like the town, I like the people. And I just thought it would be great fun to tackle it.
Question about the construction timeline once you receive approvals to when residents actually will move in.
Yeah, I went through that a little bit earlier, maybe not including when residents are going to move in, but my intuition is that we will have the first residents moving in probably in 2024.
Questions about when you will show more advanced plans.
Well, we're hoping that at the next council meeting, we're going to be designated as the developer of the property. It's a procedural thing, but it has to happen. Until you're really designated developer, you're not 100% sure you're going to be able to develop the property. But we meet the two major criteria to be designated. We have control over the property. As you said at the beginning, we have it under contract. And we also have 41 years of redevelopment experience, and most of that is dealing with brownfield sites. So we think we're particularly suited for this type of project, and we believe the council is going to discover that too. We're going to make a presentation to the council, and hopefully they will go ahead and vote to designate us as the developer. We will then ramp up the design team. We'll come out with elevations. We'll come out with a more detailed site plan, and I think there'll be a lot of the missing information you don't see in a massing plan like this one will be available. I would say that, on the schedule we're on right now, probably within a month and a half, we'll have some elevations and some renderings to start to show folks and take some feedback on that.
Question about when there's an interest in continuing to host large events on Stangl Road. Stangl Road is an arts and cultural district, and it's only becoming more of an arts and cultural district. So in the past, both the Liberty Village parking lots were usually overrun by cars. So I think I don't think the burden is solely on your shoulders to solve that problem, but it is something that additional parking for large events will be something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, we may see that there's some capacity in these parking lots. A lot of the zoning standards call for really more parking than you need. I know in Jersey City, we did a study of parking usage, and we found that in there, the standard is 1 parking spot per residential units. And after the study we did, and we saw all these half-empty garages all over the place, the city of Jersey City changed the zoning to 0.5. So you only need 1 parking spot for every 2 units. Now, Jersey City and Hoboken is a much more commutable area. It's got a lot of mass transit, so that makes sense there. But we may find that in this market that, particularly with the apartments, everybody may not have cars. They may walk or take mass transit. There are buses and other ways to go. Uber and such are starting to eat into the need people traditionally had to own 1 or more cars. So it's entirely possible we may have some spare capacity on these parking lots. And certainly if there is, and then there's a big event coming up the street, we may be able to make some of that excess parking capacity available. We'll have to see how that evolves.
There's a couple of questions about sustainable construction techniques that you've used in other projects that are construction cost sensitive, and about meeting state mandates and energy codes is really a minimal commitment. What's your experience with sustainable construction techniques that are cost effective?
I would say that since I've been building 40 years ago, the building codes have continuously gotten better in terms of energy efficiency. You now have much more strict energy requirements in terms of the building envelope, the insulation, the appliances, the mechanical systems, the furnace, the hot water system. Those are all light years more efficient than they were when I first started building. So the building codes all by themselves are generating much more efficient housing just because it's required to do that. As I mentioned, in Jersey City, where, the least expensive home goes for $750,000, $1 million, you certainly have a lot more money to work with. The number one thing that's going to make this project successful is if these homes are affordable, and they're affordable to the mass market so that they get purchased and occupied quickly. So we're going to do everything we can. Certainly we're going to meet the code. There's no choice there. You have to meet the code. If there are additional things we can do as we design these buildings, I'll be making sure that my design team knows that I'm sensitive to that and that the community is sensitive to that. And if there are additional things we can do that don't add a whole lot to the cost and push up the price of homes or the apartments too far, we'll certainly consider them.
Hang on one sec. There are definite questions about, will you be doing the selling and leasing, or we work with local realtors? And I think I might know who asked that question.
And, I bet it was a realtor.
And also, will there be on-site property management, and is there a homeowners association for the townhomes? I know those are far down the road, but I think that question really speaks to how well organized this development will be.
Well, it's yes to all three. So the first question is yes, we always participate with local brokers. We will have a sales center and a leasing center that will be set up to make it easy to bring in your customers, and we do pay commissions and fees. That's the first question. The second one is there will be an HOA that'll be run by the homeowners for the townhouse part of the project. The apartment buildings will have a professional property management company that'll manage them and take care of the maintenance and such. Was there a third question, or was it just those two?
I think it's just those two.
Okay.
So people want to know if other developers will be showing design concepts, and I think that the answer is you are under contract for this property.
Correct. No other developers will be showing plans for this property. Assuming I get designated as a developer in the near term, it'll be us.
More questions about historical significance and the fabric and the character of Flemington, and how this project will fit in, or what you'll be able to tie in from the historical character that surrounds the property, and a lot of concerns or questions about the railroad.
Well, I mean, the designs, we're going to probably come out with a couple of different designs, and we're going to test those in the community and with the marketing people. We don't want these to have an urban look. We don't think that's appropriate here, like the kinds of brownstones and row houses we worked on in the cities where we were developing for a long time, Hoboken, Jersey City, and soon Bayonne and Troy. So we're going to try to have our design team come up with some elevation renderings that have some echoes of the architecture, but you can't really, I'm not one of these Disneyland developers that takes what Disney does when you walk down Main Street down in Disney World, and he recreates this whole urban thing, which is all just facade work. We're going to try to do contextual design, but it's not going to be fake. We're going to, these are going to be townhouses. They're going to look like townhouses. They're not going to look like beautiful Victorian homes with all sorts of gingerbread and big wraparound porches and such. That would just be phony. So we're going to have our design team really concentrate on the elevations. We know that's always important to the community and particularly the people that live right around the project. So we have every intention of really making the design team work at coming up with a couple of different concepts we'll roll out and see which ones people seem to like.
And George, questions about, and again, I don't think the burden of this doesn't fall solely on you, but questions about how this jives with the master plan and your familiarity with the master plan, with plans for Flemington, reports that have been done in the past.
Yeah, I think it comports with the master plan update, which was informed by the Stantec study, and I think it comports with the housing report that Volk Zimmerman did. I was very happy to hear you're going to have another presentation of those plans because I think it's important for the community to understand the research and the homework that's been done by the town to try to inform, what exactly the future should look like. So we spent a lot of time studying those reports, and we believe this is responsive. I mean, in a nutshell, it said the city needs a lot more housing. That's really the bottom line of both studies, and then you can wrap a whole bunch of detail around that. But the bottom line is they both concluded that what's going to make Flemington's future more, revitalizing is to bring more families into Flemington, and that's exactly what we're doing here.
Thank you. Definitely a lot of questions about older population, aging populations, ADA compliance, and how does this housing speak to the fact that there is a large aging population in Flemington and in our surrounding area?
Well, ADA is not optional. ADA is a requirement. When you design certain types of buildings that have ADA requirements, you have to do that. And we certainly follow the rules. So, ADA compliance, it's not even a question, but whenever it's required, it'll be incorporated. Aging population, yeah, I think that, and I think the Zimmerman-Volk study bore this out, that there will be a demographic of folks that are willing to leave the empty nest, the big old house in the country with all the lawns and gardening and snow shoveling you have to do. And they're going to want to move into these townhouses where everything's going to be done for them by the HOA, or they're going to want to rent an apartment where everything will be done by the property manager. I think this is a perfect place for empty nesters to relocate to that want to stay in the area and be in a nice walkable community like Flemington. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to get a significant amount of customers to both segments, the townhouses and the apartments, from the old baby boomers like myself.
Questions about impacts on sewer, water, and other infrastructure systems.
Yeah, we met with the water and sewer guys in town, and they assured us they have capacity. We ran some numbers, some flow numbers based on this plan, and they assured us that they have significant capacity. We know the town is looking to do another water well, and I believe that they're hot on the trail of getting some infrastructure money to put another water well in, although we've been told by the water guy there's enough water for this project right now. But, for the future, there's always good to have more water, not less. So, supply, utility supply is available to the property. We're going to put in all new infrastructure. All the infrastructure that's under the mall is getting ripped out. There's very little infrastructure under the parking lot. All the stormwater systems were clogged a long time ago. Those are all going to be ripped out and replaced. And same thing with all the roads. There'll be all new roads, all new infrastructure.
There are specific questions about height of the structures.
Yeah, the townhome, I'm sorry, is that the whole question?
I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, the townhomes will most likely be 4 floors. And the apartment buildings, if the parking is on the surface around the buildings, there'll probably be 3 or 4 floors. And if we end up deciding we can do podium buildings because we don't get flood zone relief we're looking for, those will probably be podium buildings, which are typically 4/1, where the first floor is a garage and then the next 4 floors are wood frame construction. So they would be 5 floors. They could be 4 total, but the most likely if we do podiums, they'll be 5. The garage level and then 4 floors of apartments above.
I want you to know, everyone, that we've received about 150 questions. So I've tried to aggregate them as fairly as possible. Um, we're able to preserve the questions, so George, I will send them to you, and you can really get a finer view of all of them. And I think you know, some of them can be answered in future sessions or directly. We don't want to, we'll figure out what we have capacity to do. But I know that some of the questions are really about why housing and how housing will help Flemington. And did you think about building anything else? And just an overall uh, directional question about why this is what you're coming to present this evening. So I think the opportunity to have the Stantec report and the Zimmerman Voc market forecast analysis reread to the community and have the community actually ask questions and answers will be really helpful. And I think it'd be great if you attended that meeting, so you can also have the benefit of the community's questions at that meeting as well. But do you want to just generally speak to why housing and what you believe that will do for this community?
Yeah, well, first of all, you mentioned early on that you're going to have a presentation again for the community of the Stantec and the Zimmerman reports. You don't have a date for that yet, right?
Not yet, but
not yet. Okay, so that'll be one avenue. But the other avenue is, I believe those reports are downloadable, aren't they, on the town's website?
Yes.
Yes. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in the research that went into our concept plan here. Just download a copy. It's free. You can read it. You can see the data they collected. You can see the analysis that goes into the data and the conclusions and recommendations that were made by those 2 companies. They're top shelf companies and great reputations. They weren't hired by me. They were hired by the town. And we took very seriously what those conclusions and recommendations were. Bottom line, and I probably said it 2 or 3 times now, but it's worth repeating. They said that to reinvigorate Flemington and to stabilize the tax base and to help the merchants survive, they need about 1,000 new families to move into town. So this plan here is about 375 units, if in fact the parking lot got built out as it's depicted right here, which is, you know, uncertain at this point. But let's say it is 375. You got Jack Cuss got another 200, so you're at 475, 575. I understand there's a project being proposed up by the Amway site, which I think has 100 units for 675. So literally within 5 years, maybe 10, you may be very close to the targeted increase in families and housing in town. And I think as that all comes online, you're going to see a reinvigorated town. You're going to see people's taxes go down or at least not increase as much. And you're going to see the merchants that have been struggling doing much better. You're going to see additional merchants coming in, this DIY group that's coming into town right now. They obviously think there's a great future here, or they wouldn't be putting a footprint down right up the block. And I believe that as all these other merchants begin to do better, it's going to attract even more people to come into town. More, you know, retailers and different types of vendors to come into town, which is exactly what it needs, in my opinion, and in the more importantly, in the opinion of Stantec and Zimmer.
So, thank you for that. People have some questions about what is the property that you own? Is it everything that you're showing here on the map?
Yes,
Okay,
it's exactly what you see on the map.
because there are some questions about platform one property and the buildings across 12. So I think for the record, you should state what that it is what's in green on the map here.
That's all we have under contract at this point. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking to some of the other folks that have properties adjacent to the parking lot. But those are just discussions at this point. I mean, we really want to get this plan moving because there's a critical time element to getting this site plan approved so we can get into the construction documentation, get the building permits, and get the construction loans closed so we can start building out the mall site. There'll be more time, I'm sure, before the parking lot gets resolved, a lot depending upon this flood mitigation plan we've got. So our plan right now is to get this site plan or something similar to this site plan approved by the planning board so we can start the mall site. Then there'll be plenty of time, because I know how long the DEP takes, particularly with something as innovative as this flood mitigation strategy we're proposing. It's going to take them a while to get their arms around it and give us hopefully an approval to proceed with that. And if they do, then we're going to want to add, if we can, get some of these properties around the parking lot to be added onto it. Because as you can see, the parking lot is a really odd shape. It's a very difficult site to lay out. If we had this wooded lot up here at the top and this parking lot at the bottom and some of these pieces along Route 12, we would have a much more efficient layout. We could do more in terms of flood mitigation because I believe if they bought the concept, they wouldn't mind just expanding the concept. I mean, we've proposed to double the amount of flood storage that's currently being provided right here on this parking area. And if they think, as I believe they should, that this is a good thing, not only for the people that live near the flood basin here between Route 12 and Mine Street, but also for people downstream.
George, everyone wants you to know that you spelled Church Street wrong. I'm sorry to be the bearer of the bad news, but
oh, it says Crutch Street. Okay, thank you for that. I will certainly correct that on the next iteration.
I know you will. And people, there are a couple questions about the blue. What is that blue pool of water or blue?
Yeah, that's a detention basin. We're hoping we're going to be able to get a wet pond, which is one of the green infrastructure BMPs that you're permitted to do now. So that'll just be part of the stormwater management system. And I'd love it if we could keep it a wet pond. I don't really like detention basins because they're kind of ugly when they're dry and then they're full for a little while and then they get muddy and ugly again. I'd rather have a wet pond there that would handle the stormwater. Maybe we get a fountain in the middle of it, some type of a water feature when you're coming into the development, or even when you're just driving down Route 12, it'll be something nice to look at, but it's also functional.
And someone asked if you don't get I'm sorry, I think that question actually disappeared.
It'll come back.
Yes. Let's see. I think a question about market studies being done during a pandemic. Are those really relevant to the future demands and needs of the borough?
I would suggest they are completely. I mean, the pandemic has been going on for 2 years. Flemington has been declining for a lot longer than that. But I would ask that question when you have your public presentation from the Stantec folks and the Vogue Zimmer folks. I think I know what the answer is, but I don't want to speak for them.
No, there's definitely a lot of demographic data about the decline of cities and office as being preferred over housing, and that the patterns that have been changed because of the pandemic are not going to revert anytime quickly. So,
Right.
but we will get one of our experts to answer that question. So we're rounding. You have 2 minutes. If there are more thoughts you'd like to share, um, or we will share all the questions with you, and we're happy to take questions for George. The FCP, the Flemington Community Partnership, also, Love Flemington sponsored this meeting and the last meeting, which was in person, and we had about 80 people in attendance asking questions. I think this is the civic process that Jeremy Long, who's the our council liaison, mentioned, and I'm really encouraged by our ability to have these questions and answers, and to have you come and speak to the community. And I'm sure this is one of many future meetings.
Yeah, so just my concluding thought is, first off, I want to thank everybody for taking the time tonight to take a look at the concept plan, learn a little bit about our background and capabilities, and to give some great questions. Every time I get questions like this, it makes me think more. You know, are we addressing what the community needs us to address? And it kind of informs the direction I'm going to give my designers. So I thank you all for that. As Robin said, I'm very accessible. I'm not one of these developers that hides from the public. I believe that I have a responsibility to listen to the public and to try to understand what their needs are and their questions, and to figure out a way to come up with a plan that can satisfy some of those concerns. I mean, we can't make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time, but we're going to try to get a pretty high hit rate here. If I can make, 90% of the people happy, that's pretty darn good. So we're going to continue the conversation. There'll be other opportunities. There'll be more information coming after the developer designation occurs in the near future. We're going to really get the design team started on elevations and renderings, and we're going to see whether any refinements need to be made to the layout you're looking at here. We're working full speed ahead on the flood mitigation plan. We flew over the sites in early December. There are these planes that you use that are equipped with topographic recording gear, and they record the topography of the area. We had them record the parking lot and the areas along the stream all the way up above Mine Street. A lot of the property that we think would be excellent for this potential flood mitigation plan is over on DeVore Farms. We're in discussions with them right now to see whether or not they want to participate in what could be a real big improvement to the flood situation that we all just experienced when Ida blew through here a couple of weeks ago. DeVore Farms had some tremendous damage to their property too. So hopefully they'll see that this is a benefit to them, and it's a benefit to the basin, the people that live in this basin, and also the people downstream, and they'll agree to go along with what we're proposing for them. I mean, essentially, when we excavate an area, let's say that DeVore Farms agreed to go along with this plan, all we're going to do is we're going to excavate that field, which we think would be the perfect place to do it. The one that's right across where Mine Street turns and heads north. There's a huge field on the left side that's at a very high elevation. And we would propose to them that we would excavate that down to below flood zone and then just plant the same thing that's there now. I mean, it will look exactly as it looks today, only it'll be lower by several feet. So we're hoping that they'll decide that this is a good thing for them and for the region, and they'll decide to participate with us. That would be really fabulous if they would. So again, I want to thank you all. I mean, I'm hearing you. I'm going to read through the questions again. I'm going to make sure that the designers are sensitive to these issues you guys have raised. And as we develop the plans and the elevations and the renderings, we'll be having more of these meetings so we can show you exactly where we're going and do some more listening. So thank you all for taking your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you all for attending, and we'll share your questions with George and continue this dialogue. So Everyone have a nice evening. Thank you very much. And I'm going to end this meeting.
Thanks, Robin. You did a great job. Good MC.
It was a lot of fun. George, Central Avenue is now Central Station. The name has been changed. So when you make the Church Street correction, you need to make that one too.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye, Sarah. Thanks for helping.
Thanks, Sarah.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.